Seed functionalization is of great interest at present to the field of organic synthesis and organometallic chemistry. This is due in large part to the need for producing chemicals in high yield with few to no byproducts. Often, when byproducts are obtained in a reaction, one must purify out any unwanted chemicals. This is often a time consuming and expensive process involving any of the following: silica gel column chromatography, filtration, recrystallization, and distillation. Beyond the issues that often arise from having to remove potential impurities, many methods for synthesizing molecules of interest require highly selective ways of activating CH bonds. Nitration is of special interest because addition of nitro groups often allows for increased ability to direct later steps in a synthetic scheme. Additionally, nitro groups can themselves be transformed into other functional groups via reduction to an amine. Finally, nickel compounds are of tremendous interest to current researchers in the field of organometallics. This is due in large part to how inexpensive these compounds tend to be when compared with more traditional compounds containing significantly rarer metals. Additionally, nickel compounds are significantly safer and more selective than the mixture of nitric acid and sulfuric acid that is more traditionally used for nitration of aromatic compounds. This summer, I've examined a proposed pathway for nitrating 8-aminoquinoline derivatives using nickel catalysis. More specifically, I have looked into the role of the nickel compound that is used as the catalyst in the nitration. I did this by systematically testing each nickel source that I had available to me to determine which of them, if any, were able to reliably catalyze the nitration of 8-benzimidine. As Figure 1 indicates, there are a number of possible CH bonds that are available to activation via nickel catalyzed nitration. However, I have only observed nitration at the C5 position, which is labeled in red, and the C7 position, which is labeled in blue. This is important because, as mentioned earlier, selectivity is key to being able to produce the product you want with relative purity and in relatively high yield. As Figure 2 indicates, almost every nickel source tested was able to catalyze the nitration of 8-benzimidine. In addition, nickel acetate tetrahydrate was determined to be the optimal catalyst for the site-selective CH nitration of 8-benzimidine. Interestingly, however, the nickel compound that had the highest yield of the C7 nitro product was nickel sulfate hexahydrate. Figure 3 is a representative NMR spectrum for the nickel catalyzed nitration of 8-benzimidine using dimethylsulfone as the internal standard. In particular, this spectrum was the one that I collected from the reaction involving nickel acetate tetrahydrate. The peaks that are labeled from left to right as 5 nitro, 8 benzometequinoline, and 7 nitro are those that were used for the calculation of the yield of each of those species by comparison with the dimethylsulfone peak. For most NMR data that I collected this summer, I used deuterated chloroform. However, I did attempt to use other solvents. I eventually settled on chloroform because I had more experience working with it, and it did give me more consistent spectra. In conclusion, it appears that a number of potential nickel sources would be effective for the site-selective CH nitration of 8-benzimidine. Nickel acetate tetrahydrate, in particular, has been identified as a nickel source that is both high-yielding and relatively selective for the nitration of 8-aminoquinoline derivatives. Moving forward, I will continue to analyze the data that I have collected this summer on the nickel-catalyzed nitration of 8-benzimidine. At the time of my recording this presentation, I'm working on 4 additional nitration reactions that I will complete this week. These reactions should more or less finish out my screening of nickel sources. Beyond nickel source, I will look into the role of solvent, acid-base conditions, reaction time, and temperature in the selective nitration of 8-benzimidine. I plan to complete most of this work in the fall of 2021 so that I can move into the next stage of the project. I will then begin to look at other potential starting materials for the nitration to determine for what compounds, if any, nickel acetate tetrahydrate is able to catalyze the nitration. Hopefully, before I graduate, I will be able to then examine the mechanism of the nickel catalyzed nitration of 8-benzimidine to help shed some light on how nickel compounds behave in these catalytic systems. Special thanks to Dr. Jessica Hoover, Dr. Andreas Bauer, Maria L. Murray, Joseph P. LeConte, the NIH, and the SURE program.